This is Chutter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Mike Soubirous. He is a member of the Riverside City Council. He had been a police officer in a prior lifetime. And you recently had an op-ed published in the Press Enterprise. And I have to tell you, when I read this, I was stumped. I had no idea how many unmarked police vehicles there are in the field when compared to the black and whites.
Yes.
Before we talk about that lopsided nature, what's the difference, sir, between an unmarked police vehicle and an undercover police vehicle?
Great question. And really, undercover operations are those operations where they want to do surveillance or things like that, and they don't want to literally be made, I think is what you would say in the business.
Sure.
You know, they don't want anybody that's involved in criminal activity. It's an opportunity not for apprehension, but more to observe so they can obtain evidence.
Investigation.
So most often, undercover cars are maybe vehicles that would be non-traditional even cars. They could be trucks, they could be anything, and a lot of them are even rented. So these are vehicles that are used for a very, very specific purpose for surveillance and then apprehension of maybe, you know, drug deals and things like that.
Okay, so what we're about to talk about is not undercover vehicles.
That's right.
We are now talking about marked versus unmarked cars. In Riverside City, how many marked patrol cars are there versus unmarked? I have the number. Should I say it?
I believe it was 167 for the marked.
What I have down,
Yes.
I mean, so there's 114 marked patrol cars,
Yes.
169 unmarked. Sir, I mean, I would have thought there'd be, I don't know, 200 marked and 2 unmarked.
Yes.
Am I off base? I thought that every car was marked. I mean, why have an unmarked car?
Yeah, there's a trend among a lot of police departments to, you know, have some unmarked cars. Usually it's they're assigned to like lieutenants and above with some departments. Some departments it's captains and above, mostly command staff, so that if they're in a business suit going somewhere to a meeting or whatever, they're not in a marked unit. And it all depends on the department size.
What's the rationale for even a cop in a suit not to be in a marked vehicle? It seems to me that driving in a marked vehicle has so many benefits.
Yes.
First of all, it's just there's a cop, so slow down. Secondly, when the cop shows up in a suit and a marked vehicle, even more stature.
Yes, that could be. You know, one line of thought. The other is that particular manager that may be going from meeting to meeting or doing some different other type duties. You know, they can stop with their unmarked car that does have some lighting, and they could, you know, render aid or you know, stabilize a scene. But a lot of times they're not recognizable as an officer. So there is that dynamic that there can be that problem that if they were to jump into a situation, they don't have their vest on.
So again,
a bulletproof vest.
Problem.
Yes.
I mean, problem. So why is it, again, forgive me if I'm being naive, why aren't 100% of police vehicles marked? Again, not undercover. Yes. I'm trying to understand as a simpleton, why ever have an unmarked vehicle?
Yeah, I would say just for some of the top staff, you know, some of the command staff. But other than that, I also question that and wonder why we are not marking more of our cars, you know, versus the unmarked. We've got a lot of detectives that have these. Now, if they're going to be doing surveillance, they can use an undercover car.
That's a whole other conversation.
But for driving around, I believe that the more cars that we do mark would be better off for us. But, you know, I'm trying to give you the back and forth argument that I hear from some of the law enforcement community. And again, it depends on some departments. Some departments locally of similar size only allow their command staff, you know, 10, 5, 7, whatever their number is, to drive those unmarked cars. The rest of the cars are all marked. In Riverside, we allow our helicopter pilots, some civilians, some of the non-uniform supervisors, all the detectives, any SWAT team member, we allow them to have unmarked cars.
But it seems like it's a perk almost to have an unmarked car. Why is it perceived that way? Again, if I were a cop, I'd want a marked car with the lights and everything.
Yes. Well, and that becomes a problem too, is because a lot of these cars are allowed to be taken home.
And let's talk about that. I want to really dig deep into that issue.
And so, you know, I guess there's two ways to look at it, but I think there needs to be a formula or a percentage that, you know, that a city agrees to in its policy that, you know, X amount of our fleet is going to be marked vehicles.
Because most people would say, let's talk about taking vehicles home.
Yeah.
Why are police officers taking police vehicles, I guess marked or unmarked, home?
Well, the rationale, I believe, with taking these unmarked cars home is that the officers can respond back in case of emergency. See, this kind of goes back to some years ago when some detectives, they didn't have cell phones back in the 40s,
Okay.
50s, 60s,
Sure.
80s. And so they were taking a radio car home. So if they had to be called out for some kind of homicide late at night, they could just get the phone call, hop in the car, get the details from dispatch, and you've already got that communication. But nowadays with a cell phone, and there's policy in place to pay the officers their mileage on a callback, basically coming back on overtime.
Right.
They can easily utilize their own vehicles and come back.
Okay, but wait. Let's say, for argument's sake, that someone is being called back. Wouldn't it be better for them to be in a marked car if they're being called back?
And that is one of the arguments that can be made on that side. Absolutely. It's, these cars generally all have radios in them. Most of them have subdued lighting, that basically they're up in the rear view mirror and on the rear deck, that if you were to look closely, walking by it, you might see these lights.
What
so
about
they do have emergency lighting, most of them, and radios.
Cameras?
And that's another question. Most of the patrol cars that are the marked units usually will have a camera, but not necessarily the unmarked cars.
Forgive me. I'm a neutral journalist, but I'm stumped by this. I truly am stumped. You've uncovered this issue. When is there going to be a change, if there is going to be one?
Well, there is the report coming back to our Public Safety Committee that will basically, the three council members on that committee will...
Are you one?
No, I was, and we've had a re-election, so we've reshuffled everything.
Okay, that's fine.
But I am going to substitute in for
Right.
that particular item. And we're going to discuss this and possibly move it forward. I would hope we would, to the full council to weigh in on this and discuss this.
Is there a fiscal component here? Are marked cars more expensive?
No, I wouldn't say that the marked cars are more expensive, because you can order them up painted black and white, and you don't have to put overhead lighting on them. You can have just the little pop-up light or whatever that can be used. So they don't have to be as full-blown, so to speak, as the marked units. But there's a lot of fiscal things that come involved. First off, if you're taking these cars home, you've got increased wear and tear. You've got increased liability in case somebody gets involved in a crash.
Right.
And the rationale of taking a car home to Murrieta, Temecula, and then racing back to come back to a incident
And you're
scene.
racing back in a car that doesn't look like a cop car.
Right, or even across town. Absolutely.
Okay, so I understand you've done a little research with sister cities, either in the region or otherwise. Riverside clearly is lopsided the wrong way, pursuant to what your op-ed says. What have you heard otherwise?
Well, in looking at these other cities, and again, you tell the staffer or whoever's looking into this, or the representative from the police department, that look, don't count the undercover cars.
Course.
But some of them did. But even then, the vast majority of the communities that have marked and unmarked, most of the police departments generally will have more marked than unmarked, because that's the bulk of the officers in uniform.
So
that's the numbers.
Were you surprised when you saw this? I mean, how did it even come to your attention?
A little bit of lack of seeing a lot of cars and seeing a lot of unmarked cars, and I don't see unmarked cars on stops. So they're doing a traditionally different job, but being in law enforcement, you kind of get that feel for departments and how their numbers sit with some of the marked.
So where do you go from here? I mean, clearly you've hit on something.
Yes, it's a review. It's questions that are being asked. I mean, I'm supposed to be fiscally responsible with the people's money as a council member.
What does Chief Diaz say, Sergio Diaz?
He actually takes a contrary view. He did agree that when we redid the bargaining for our managers originally, that they had a take-home car policy, and above and beyond taking the car home, they could drive it as their own car. That was actually a negotiated benefit, to use it unlimited on their own. He felt that wasn't a good idea for the city with liability.
You need to come back on this issue, because this is really quite remarkable. His name is Mike Soubirous, a member of the Riverside City Council. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter Local Edition.